I'm going to be frank with you here. This was originally going to be a video on Warao and the languages like it. Their speaker numbers, their futures in terms of language vitality, various features, and so on and so forth, with kind of a focus on their unusual object-subject-verb word order. But while I was editing that video and getting ready to upload it, I found that their OSV word order is actually much more interesting than I had previously thought. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. What's up, my dudes? My name is Mim of Pragma Syntactics, and today we're going to be talking about one word order that could change everything. First, some background information. There are 6 theoretical possibilities for the way in which words in a very basic sentence can be arranged. In a very rough order of rarity, SVO, which would be I eat cake, SOV, I cake eat, VSO, eat I cake, VOS, eat cake I, OVS, cake eat I, and OSV, cake I eat. Their rarities in terms of how often they're seen across the world's languages actually looks more like this, and quantifying which languages use which word order can be kind of complicated, considering languages can use more than one for different purposes. French is by and large SVO, but uses VSO for questions sometimes, and Japanese uses things like particles to tell the difference between SOV and OSV, but doesn't really count as an OSV language. And then there's the issue of topicalization, which is something we can do in English, where we move the object to the front of the sentence and then put emphasis on it, so cake I eat, or more likely, this cake I eat, and it works just fine. And then there's the problem of languages which don't really have a fixed word order at all, and it's all a massive mess. Fortunately, we can say we're going to narrow it down to just a basic sentence. When I don't want to emphasize anything and I'm not asking a question, which word order would I use? Whatever the answer is, that's then considered the unmarked word order, and the one you generally use by default in that language. If you take that as the condition, SVO and SOV are by far the most common word orders, covering over 80% of languages, and OSV is the least common, with less than 10 languages using it as their default, and that's not even including Yoda speak. But that's nowhere near the best thing about it. Right now, one of the best ways we have to analyze the way a sentence works is something called a syntax tree. Well, not so much analyze as represent, but you get what I mean. Now, this is where things get kind of complicated, and I don't have a linguistics degree, but I'll try my best to explain. A syntax tree is basically a diagram which shows which bits of a sentence come from and are connected to which other bits of a sentence. So an object is bound to a verb, which can then be attached to a subject, or a subject is attached to an adjective, which can then be attached to another adjective, which is then attached to a prepositional phrase, which is a preposition and a noun. All this relies on something called X-bar theory, which is the bit which says that phrases may contain intermediate bits which come from a head, and this projecting system can happen across more than one kind of word / category / etc. So it can happen from nouns, adjectives, verbs, and so on. I'm actually going to be doing a whole video on this subject where I go into way more detail than I can here, so keep an eye out for that. But for now, here are some links on further reading on X-bar theory if you want a better idea of what I'm going on about. As I said, I don't have a linguistics degree, and this is kind of complicated. So if you're going to use this theory to make a syntax tree of an SVO sentence, it'll look like this. So you've got the V and the O as one constituent, and the S is joined onto the side. Constituents are decided using constituency tests, another video that's coming soon. Here's the diagram of SOV, pretty similar. Here's VOS, a little different, but still the same principle, as with OVS. VSO is slightly more tricky, and technically there isn't really an agreed representation of what a tree would look like for this one. Here's a proposed one I found while researching. You can see it looks super different to the others and doesn't really fit in perfectly with the theory. But at least there's something, right? Well, no, but this is a video about VSO and not the philosophy of theorizing. So now that you mention, which leaves us with just OSV. I could not find anything which let me map OSV using X-bar theory. In fact, it was while I was trying to draw a syntax tree for one of my examples in my Warao video that I found that OSV doesn't fit into X-bar theory at all. No wonder I couldn't draw a tree for it. You can draw a tree for when it's a marked word order by saying that the sentence looks like this and then moving one thing to the front so that it looks like this. But when it's the default, it's impossible, which means that OSV single-handedly undermines the #1 theory of how to represent sentences, which, as you can imagine, is kind of a big deal. It means that we have to doubt its ability to represent anything, and we need a new way of doing things. The only issue is we don't really have an alternative. It works just fine for everything else, so why doesn't it work for OSV? The simple answer is that it's because the verb is separated from the object, but is there no other way to represent it that could fit in? Is the fact that OSV doesn't fit with the X-bar theory why it's so rare? Less than 1% of the world's languages use the OSV word order. Could it have something to do with that? Well, there's a whole bunch of different ideas as to why you basically never see it. One is that it could be efficiency. If you say I cake, you probably know that the verb is going to be something like eat. And if I say I eat, you're going to expect me to say some kind of food. If I say cake I, you would also expect the next word to be eat. So the theory doesn't really make much sense. And we need to be really careful about our bias as speakers coming into when we make assertions like this. We have a tendency to think our language is better than any other and we have the most intuitive way of doing things, when that's simply probably not the case. Another idea I found was that word orders which put the object first lead to the least uniform information density in all three positions the O, the V, and the S could be in. But everything I could find on that theory was really vague and not particularly helpful, and it reeked of speaker bias. It could be because the subject is generally the focus of sentences, so it would make sense to put it at the start. Or maybe it's easier to imagine the subject carrying things towards the object rather than the object to the subject, but it's still super unclear. Really, there has to be a reason why it's so rare, right? Personally, I'm pretty sure there is. We just haven't found it yet. We also haven't found an alternative to X-bar theory that would allow us to map this thing, so the search continues. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you want me to upload that wow video, then please leave a comment down below, or just comment and tell me what you thought about this video and OSV word order and its implications. I'm kinda new to this, as you can see, but I'm trying my best. Please share, like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. We need all the help we can get in the fight for great linguistics content. Anyway, I have been Mim of Pragmatics and Tactics, and I will see y'all next time. Bye!